Okay, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to Managing Cat Volume. Today, I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so I don't have my best radio voice, but I'm going to rally and I'm looking forward to today. So this is one of our first sessions, and afterwards, we'd love to hear feedback on other topics. We're going to be doing this quarterly this year. My name is Lisa Lavner, and I'm Chief Operating Officer of Birchfire Water Restoration Technical Institute, and also VP of Operations Design and partner of iRestore. And I know we have current users and we have people who aren't users, and this is going to be a very conceptual, theoretical discussion to help give you some tips for preparing for cat volume. I will be using iRestore examples, but it's gonna be a backdrop and it'll serve you well with whatever system you're using. I'm just gonna check. I hear some back noise. Make sure I have everyone muted. So everybody is on mute, but I encourage you to type your questions in throughout in the chat box, and we'll also have a couple minutes at the end for Q&A if we don't get to any of them during the actual presentation. Okay. So when we talk about cat loss, it's kind of funny because a lot of times people outside of our industry say, "Oh, you must have had a great year because you had all this flooding or all these frozen pipes or all of this happened." And the funny thing is when you're dealing with cat volume, it can be very good luck and great things can happen for your company, but we don't really know. And I want to start out with this little Chinese proverb that I love that kind of says it all. There's an old story about a Chinese farmer whose horse escaped into the hills. When his neighbors expressed their sympathy for his bad luck, he told them, "Bad luck, good luck, who knows?" Soon the horse returned with a herd of wild horses from the hills. When his neighbors congratulated the farmer on his good luck, he told them, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" The farmer's son worked to break the horses and instead fell and broke his leg. When the neighbors expressed their sympathy for his bad luck, he told them, "Bad luck, good luck, who knows?" While the son was healing, the army arrived and officers conscripted every able-bodied young man in the village. Since his son was not taken, his neighbors congratulated the farmer on his good luck. He told them, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" Life is not a single scene. It's a whole movie that must play out. Our only challenge or opportunity is that we don't know what comes next. And that can't be more true of restoration and when we're managing cat loss volume. And so luck is really what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And that's what today's session is about, on how can we best prepare for cat volume. So disaster is struck. Do we feel like we're ready? And one of the key things that I want to kind of get everybody to start thinking about is we really just simply need to be ready for anything. And disasters in our world come in all kinds of different shapes and forms. And start thinking about creating these playbooks for different scenarios. So it could come wind if we know we're trees down and roofs compromised. We're going to need to make sure chainsaws are ready, that we have our supplies for roof tarps are extensive, more than normal volume. And when we're dealing with frozen pipes, we're obviously looking at, do we have all of our equipment? Is it in operational order? Flood water can be a little bit different in that we may have coverage issues. So we may adjust the playbook from frozen pipes where we don't have as many coverage issues typically. And then we have to throw in the fires and everything else. So the other things I want us to start thinking about in context of these playbooks is the geography, insurance coverage issues, limitations, obstacles, and other things that may be of infrastructure challenges. So we could have a cat scenario in our region that that creates travel issues. So now, even once we hit the road, a typical 30-minute drive is going to take 3 hours. So those are things we have to accommodate for. When we talk about geography, we've seen catastrophic volume events in our regions where they're very concentrated in area, maybe a 10-mile radius, and we've seen them where they're very spread out. That could create a little bit of a different playbook for us. Insurance coverage, I just touched upon the concept of flood. So are we going to handle widespread flood where there's potential coverage issues a little bit differently than a frozen pipe? Possibly. Okay, we may ask for a deposit up front. We may be dealing with more self-pays. What other limitations and obstacles by any unique cat can we account for or anticipate? And unfortunately, we can't anticipate everything, but we can learn from our experiences and develop these playbooks. I want to go through, I'm going to give you a couple examples of some of the disasters and recent memories that some of you may, to kind of piece all this together in the way that we're looking at different types and different issues that are involved with them. When we look at the polar vortex of 2014, that was really unique in that, and if you're in the business, you remembered it. It was started in January, and it was just a deep freeze for the good part of the beginning of the winter. And the limitation, obstacle, and some of the challenges that involved that is that resources were even less available than normal because it wasn't regional. It literally impacted the entire nation. And so our supplies, equipment was in high demand. Rental companies didn't have rent that normally have rental equipment available, didn't during the polar vortex. When that's very same year, and many of you may not have heard this story, I operate in eastern Pennsylvania, so there's no severe weather per se. But in May of 2014, it actually made national news. It was the only time our little town ever did. We had a hailstorm. And although the weather forecasts said, oh, we're going to have some storms, everybody was going about their day. There was no special concern for any kind of anything catastrophic ready to happen. And I literally went into my office that day, went on a conference call, did a couple things, came out of my office 2 hours later, and there was full on cat mode. And what had happened was one of these storms brought on, just to, again, our 10-mile radius in our little town, baseball size and golf ball size hailstones that caused millions, it may have even hit billion of dollars of damage, destroyed car lots, broke through windows of malls, homes, mass destruction, mass infrastructure, compromised through accidents and roadways getting closed. So this was a very specific high volume event. We could not anticipate it or predict it, and it caused mass destruction. So we need to be prepared to really kind of be nimble. When, for those of you around back in the Sandy days, that one, and sometimes we can start planning, getting everybody ready for these things, and sometimes we simply can't. And Sandy, I think they were tracking towards its path of destruction for almost a week. And so it was tracked to hit dead on in our specific coverage area. And so we immediately started to get ready, reserve rental equipment, the whole 9 yards. As the days got closer for it to hit our area, we had to make a commitment on, let's call it $30,000 to $1,000 of rental equipment. Well, we had to make the decision. At that last moment, it was 99% sure being tracked to our coverage area. We woke up the next day with a $30,000 trailer of equipment, and the storm literally turned and just deked right around our area. So it literally did not affect us. So again, we need to be ready for anything. Sometimes we have a heads up and we can anticipate, we can see the storm, the winds, we can see severe low temperatures in our future, and sometimes we can't. So our objective here today is to give you literally just some ideas and inspiration to best prepare for cat loss responses. And we're going to drill it down into some key categories. So one is we're going to talk a little bit about having a solid day-to-day operations, phones, adjust and adding to existing protocol, managing expectations, communications, and managing resources. And I'm going to be, again, going pretty fast through this because it's a lot to cover in 45 minutes, and I encourage you to ask questions. I'm specifically today going to be focusing on cat volume in your specific area. If you have any questions at the end about deploying, I'll do my best to answer them or follow up with you and get you answers about deploying. So we can definitely, and a lot of these things will still apply to if you deploy to cat regions. Okay, so solid day-to-day operations, very important. We cannot adjust and tweak and rise to an occasion when we have gaps in our regular day-to-day operations. So we need a trained and engaged team. And I will get into a little bit more of that later. But this means everybody. So it's not just our technicians, it's our marketing department, it's our accounting department. When you're in restoration, everybody has to be engaged and understand what the call of duty means. And that means when your area or you're responding to a catastrophic event that hit, people are counting on you. And everybody needs to be one with their purpose and engaged in that, regardless of their position. We need really solid processes, procedures, systems, and best practices. I'm really big on best practices, and what best practices are they're the most important things, whether it's departmental or functional, that must be done for an optimal outcome. So we have to be working within this realm on normal operation day. If we can't be effective in our process and deployment and best practices, for the most part, nobody's perfect, we always have something, but for the most part, when we're handling 3 to 5 losses a day, we can't do it when we're dealing with a call volume of 50, 60 and upwards in one day. So that's our starting point. I'm going to give you just like a very small example, and again, day-to-day operations can get super detailed, but we want everybody using the same language, utilizing whatever systems we are. And this is an example of an iRestore job screen. And you'll notice up here, there's a job status and an assignment status. So those are two key pieces of information. If I'm taking in 50 losses, I want to utilize those. And everybody in our day-to-day needs to be speaking the same language and knowing what these things mean, because I'm going to use them to manage all the information in the jobs and the call volume that comes in. So if we look at this and imagine this is a dashboard, and I'm going through this job status, okay? Looking at this job status, I can see that I have nobody assigned. So if I just took 50 of these, I'm going to organize them by city. I'm going to be looking at all my new ones, and my first step is to get them assigned. So now my next status, my next point here is I have Ryan and Lisa's assigned. So now, great. If I'm running this dashboard, so this is my dashboard, whatever system you're using, if it's an Excel spreadsheet, this is iRestore. Somebody just asked if this is an updated screen, and I will mention if you see updates, we've done a lot of development that, or I mention an update or a new feature that you don't have. All you have to do is email sales@iRestore, and that you would like to either learn more about them or get them out to you, and we'll take care of that. So if I go through and I see, so now I know, if you imagine, oh, I'm sorry, I did the wrong email, support@irestore.io. Thank you, Ryan. And so now I know that that job's assigned. Now I know, because we're all talking the same language, and it doesn't matter what term it is, it's the point that the whole operation, the whole company understands what each thing means, so I can manage this volume. Initial paperwork, that means, who knows? And they're putting together the contracts and it's under control. What does in progress mean? That means I deployed a crew. So that one's done. Body, young man in the village. Looking at volume, even by person, how many can Lisa and Ryan handle? I can start looking at these progresses. I can start looking what needs to be assigned, and I can start being very strategic with the way I get everybody taken care of. And that's going to be key, is honoring all of our commitments to people who are calling us and also our existing customers. So phones. You may wonder why, of all the operational things, I made phones its own section. It kind of seems silly because it kind of seems um, that, oh, it's just the phones. That's the easiest thing. Well, that's why I like to talk about it. So I get very passionate because I think it's the easiest thing to manage really well for our company and get a strong, you'll see it right here. I have, it's an opportunity to shine. So when we're restorers in a catastrophic event, it's our opportunity to shine. And the first most very important thing is to answer the phone. So we can't just send everybody out in the field. We've been marketing, we've been telling people, we've been putting on our Facebook, call us, call us. We're always there for you. Where are the people who are there for you when you need help? And then we don't answer the phone. We cannot do it. We can't have full voicemails. We cannot do that. This is the easiest thing. So we don't want to put all of our focus on field deployment. It is a way. So if we get 100 calls, maybe we'll only get to 50, but we have an opportunity to make a positive impact on 100 people. That call could be the call that you've been marketing or visiting for 10 years and they have their person. Well, if their person didn't answer the phone and you did, it could be that loyal customer. It could be that loyal commercial customer who always counts on you. And then we didn't answer the phone. So it's really important to me that this is something like kind of step one to make sure we have a plan for. And again, these become part of our playbook. But when we're dealing with CAT volume, there's a lot of things we can do just to get the phone answered. So staffing and services, can we pull from other departments? That's that's the easiest, fastest thing to do. So accounting, marketing, everybody's a restorer, everybody's going to answer the phones. Aunt Betty, your neighbor, your kids, if they're old enough. Okay. So many of us have probably done that in our day. So answering the phone, the skill set we need a pleasant voice and we need somebody able to give some, good soothing information. So we can easily call a staffing agency and get somebody in to help answer those calls. We want scripts. So when I say scripts, and this is one that I'm like really nutty about, because again, we're communicating, we're building those relationships, we're telling people what we do and why they should call us because we're always there. And then they call us and we're 3 days out. Because typically when we're dealing with one of these scenarios, we can no longer do our 1 hour, our 2 hour, everything's changed. We basically almost have a waiting list. We're logging these calls, we're getting to them as quickly as we can. So what does that script look like? And again, the script is going to help people who, we pulled in Aunt Betty, the person from the staffing agency, the people even in your organization who are less experienced. So that script may sound something like that. Normally we are on site within an hour, and unfortunately, due to the mass devastation our region has experienced, we are estimating 3 days out. Would you like me to put you on our waiting list? And then they go, oh my gosh, I know. And this kills us because we're used to being able to be there right away for people. So we want to make sure that we're being honest up front in those communications. And as we create these scripts, that it's honoring the commitment, recognizing them. And people understand that they're watching the news, they see what's going on. So it's just very fundamental to the promises that we're making in our day to day. So we sent out and offered this free first notice of job report template. And if you didn't get one, we'll make sure you get one afterwards. And this is a starting point. A lot of us, even who are using software, still like to take the call with a piece of paper and then put it in, because sometimes people are kind of all over the place. So it helps us not miss any critical piece of information, because again, we want to get the information. We want to be as consistent in our day-to-day operation. So this can most definitely be used for those purposes. But I encourage you to look at it and then adapt it also for this playbook, and specifically in handling phone volumes. So the back of it, let's say, I've done it where there's specific questions on the back for different scenarios that somebody who's less trained less experienced who's taking that loss can ask the right questions to give the next person who's going to be either deploying or making contact with this customer has, and also help us prioritize the losses that come in. So examples may be, again, during a flood, we may be asking specific questions about their flood coverage, and those can be on the back. We may be asking questions like how many rooms have been affected? Is that basement finished? We see a lot of basements for those of you who are in areas where there are basements when floods hit. So we may want to be strategic so we get an idea of the extent of damage, what we're going to need to deploy. Is there a lot of contents? And our experienced people who are used to taking losses know how to talk through and the right questions to ask for the various scenarios we face. But again, we're bringing in less experience, so we can kind of adapt this first notice for that phone function during these CAT volumes. We can also create an assembly line. So everybody who's helping out with the phones doesn't necessarily need to have a computer, have your be an Iris Store user, or have access to your spreadsheet. They may literally be just taking those calls and getting that information. Okay. Quick train checklist. I mean, and again, these concepts aren't just for phones, it's different operations throughout during CAT volume, but quick train checklists are awesome. It is shocking, you know, a lot of times when we're dealing with flooding, I'll go back to flooding because a lot of times that's where people have a lot of destruction. We're dealing with flood water, which is category 3, so there's a lot of debris removal. There's the coverage issues, and so there's quick list that people even on the phone with less experience can give and develop these playbooks to help people. We can encourage them again in these scripts that, you know, this is the status of the area. We're 3 days out. I encourage you to call other companies to see if somebody can get there sooner. There's nothing wrong with that. At this point, we want to put our best foot forward when we're taking those calls and do right by people. So as much help, I've already done it depending on the circumstances and the volume, where there's one person who is just literally technical advice. So there's somebody with technical background that can give people some over the phone help and guidance on what to do. Because again, we're not going to get to them, but there's a lot we can do to shine in these moments. Okay. So adjust and add protocols. So when we go back, we have a strong day-to-day operation. And let's say for water, our day-to-day operation and our standard of care for water is actually to monitor daily. We in our company will often drain into jugs. So those are 2 examples that during CAT volumes we'll say nobody drain into jugs unless you absolutely have to. And we need to mark those, all of our documentation so we know which ones. And the reason for that is those have to take priority to go back and check on. So we're not overflowing those jugs. So that is an example. Now, if we have to have that as a normal workflow so that we can get our group together and have a good solid huddle. We can advise people, and you know, it is when we're dealing with, you're trying to, you know, 50 calls, 100 calls a day, you may not be able to monitor. You may make a decision. That's a personal company decision, but you may say, we're not going to monitor daily, and you don't charge for it. And you can advise people, say, due to the large, again, we want to script things for our people. We don't want them to just say, oh, we're not going to monitor because we have other people to take care of. We're going to say, due to the mass devastation in our area, there's a lot of people who need our help. It is our standard of care and our protocol to monitor your water loss daily. If you have no concerns, we're not going to monitor it tomorrow, but I will be back the following day. That's an example to adjust the protocol, so to buy us some time and be able to help manage the volume. And I put a little chemical sign because part of that is, again, that's being resourceful and nimble. But at any given point, and I gave the example of the polar vortex, but we have to be prepared. We don't want our teams to be dependent on one product or one specific piece of equipment. We need to be nimble. And I actually encourage people to always kind of have a couple things in place in circulation, even when um, there's no um, shortage in our specific area. You can have supply chain. When the hurricanes hit Texas and then Florida I believe it was a year ago now, there were major supply chain issues. So at any given point, we could have that impacting us, even if we're not dealing with the volume ourselves. So something to always think about in being diversified. Okay. Here's another just quick example of adjusting and adding protocols. So when we're dealing with floods, or I keep using floods because that's a great example where a lot of times there's self-pay. You know, our normal protocol may be to go out, scope the loss, write an Xactimate estimate, sketch it out, submit it in whatever fashion. But when we're trying to go fast and be nimble, this is a screenshot of the iRestore new estimating module. It may be appropriate in this case to utilize this, do a very quick estimate on site for the homeowner so they know exactly what we're looking at to do the loss, and then collect the deposit and have contracts signed right there and keep things moving. Okay. Managing expectations. So I mentioned when we're taking those phone calls, we want to be able, and again, this is all tied together, to be able to tell somebody we're 3 days out. People like that. They want to know something. As much as we can do at the time of phone call, short of deploying, the better. So if we can say we're looking at Friday or Saturday, even if it's that far, you're going to be in a lot better shape than a lot of people, because a lot of people don't even know where we're at. So even in this chaos, we always want to know where we're at and be communicating proactively. So we want to be upfront and honest with new customers. We want to be upfront and honest with existing customers. And so it does us no good to get existing customers mad because cat volume happened. So we want to make sure our team knows that we have the right communicate scripts and the right timelines in place for them as well. And for some of that is, you know, especially those, I believe a lot of us on the call here today do both the emergency, the restoration, and the construction. So when you're doing with that, the construction, the timelines can get more sensitive. And especially if you're cross training and utilizing your construction staff to help when you have cat volumes, which I am going to touch upon. But we should, to some extent, there's no crystal ball, but we want to be able to anticipate how much in-house staff we want to be using in our planning so that we're managing expectations. So if you're doing a large construction project in the winter, for example, maybe we plan to use less of your in-house trades because we're going to anticipate that we're going to have more losses in the dead of winter with frozen temperatures, although it has been very warm on the East Coast so far this winter. Financial, again, upfront and honest. I tell the story all the time of going to the dentist when my kids were small, and they were very professional, but I was very clear because of the way they said it over and over again, what I was going to pay and when I was going to pay it. And there is nothing wrong with that. When we're dealing with cat volume, it's very easy. Everybody needs help. And you know, we are there to help, but we are all in business and have to get paid and collect money for our services. So there can be kind of a, you know, a confusion with aid. So we want to be very upfront and manage the financial expectations. And we want to be communicating to those we serve. So as much as we can, you know, whether it's adjusters we're working with, agents, we want to cue them in. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in communications on what's going on in the area and what they can expect. Again, in the most honest and upfront. So this is a sample of the iRestore scheduling module, and whatever scheduling module we're using. And again, all the points that I'm going through are all intertwined and overlapping. They're not isolated. So when we talk about managing expectations, and I'm talking about telling people when I'm going to be out there, I need to know when I'm going to be out there. So I need to be nimble and have systems in place, and they have to be consistently used on a regular basis. So if today's Tuesday, January 14th, and Ryan calls, and we're experiencing cat volume, and Ryan's taking the calls, I may be having ongoing communications. Hey, Ryan, just so you know, right now I'm looking at Thursday, Friday to get crews out. As I fill up my Thursday boxes, I may be saying I'm looking at Friday to Saturday to get new crews out as you're taking calls. So we need to have these systems in place. And it is good for those of you who do repairs or be prepared to address it, is at the time of those losses, when we're doing emergencies, that your team has a script and a timeline for repairs as well. Because what we see a lot, and more of it, with the fast pace of the world and everything happening quickly, emergencies get taken care of very fast and things are moving. Everyone's getting them dry and cleaned up, and then there's a need for repairs and things kind of slow down and get scheduled out. So see and upwards in one day, and communicate that. The process that once the emergency services is done, and we get through this catastrophic event in our region, your manager will be in contact with you and review. Day-to-day operations can get super repairs that you'd like us to have, and the time frames and the costs and the process and all that stuff. So people will get antsy. So we want to kind of arm everybody with as much as we can. Okay. So communications are key, and we want to be proactive, not reactive. And so, one of the things that goes back to serving our existing customers, if there's any blips with our existing customers, we don't want to not show up because 50 losses came in. We want to be very proactive and say, severe weather has hit our region. Again, we're going to go back to these scripts. We're going to be professional, proactive. So, we're going to be out helping everybody. We'll get your job back on track and keep it on schedule, that type of thing. We don't want our team or anybody in the operation to forget about what's going on in our day-to-day. This is also tied in to the scheduling, managing expectations day-to-day, because as we try to be nimble and we get into some of the manpower challenges, is the stronger and better we are at our day-to-day. So the least amount of delays, all the information and the expectations of our customers and being communicative, then when something like this happens, they will be understanding, and you'll be able to get a little wiggle room without upsetting them. If we've already frustrated them from communications and scheduling issues, now you may be in the position that they don't care if a cat happened. They're going to be frustrated if you pull off one of their jobs for a day. So keep that in mind as this all starts to tie together for us. So business development opportunities. So I talked about at the beginning that everybody's engaged. Everybody's in the restoration industry, our marketing people, everybody. So this is a great opportunity to put yourself out there. This is when, I kind of say one of the challenges of marketing and restoration, it's not like you're looking for somebody to restore your property. Really, an average person may not even care unless something happens. When you look at the loss ratios and something happens one in every 100 policies, let's say. So it's not like I'm putting a big soda or a sneaker that everybody needs a sneaker. Everybody's thirsty for a soda. They have to have a need for them to really want to know who we are. So this is a great opportunity to really establish yourself in a community, set your brand, become a resource, because all eyes can be on you if you put them on you. So some of the things you can do are press releases. You want to get information out on social media and give those tips and different things you can do. And you may say, well, where does that start? How do I have the media reaching out to us? Well, you got to start somewhere. And so maybe for so many disasters, you're sending some press releases, just information, pictures, and then you become a go-to and you're putting that information out there. Not only can you be putting information about what's going on and how to help people, you can also, I'm big when I say proactive communications to your relationships, your community, your business partners, is if you have a mass email system, for example, is acknowledge what's going on, that your best practices, your being on site in an hour have been compromised due to the volume. People respect that and appreciate that. You may say some of our communication best practices and protocols. Maybe you communicate every within so many hours to an adjuster or whatever the case may be. Let people know they've been compromised and that you're going to get back on when we get back to normal volume. You'll get a lot of respect for that. But press release. So the in 2018 in our region, we had again another unique, unusual event, and it was ongoing flooding. And what made it unique was that it was, I believe, the first flood was in July, and it was in a very specific town, a very specific area. And so mass flooding, mass destruction. Well, 2 days later, there was a flooding event in another area. And this literally continued moving throughout our 60-mile radius, but very different towns throughout the summer, all the way through September. And there was no way to necessarily anticipate each flood because it was this kind of day in the life. There was no way to anticipate at the beginning of July that there would be a constant stream for 2.5 months. So that created a whole nother unique set of challenges. But what we started doing at one point, because there was so much mass devastated, we started donating antimicrobial with instructions to people and did a little press release on it. So that's just a little example of doing something for the community and reaching out. The teams and families. So we really want to make sure, at any given point, we all have a lot of new people in our organization. So starting at the interview, we want to make sure that they understand what's happening and what's going on, depending on how long it is. Especially in this day and age, it's important to communicate with the families. So if it's a 3-day high volume event, maybe you don't. But when you're going where it could be weeks, the polar vortex was a pretty extended period of time of a lot of people working a lot of hours. So a letter will go out to the family saying, this is what your mommies and daddies and brothers and sisters and friends are doing and helping, and we appreciate you. And there's a lot of little things you can do, but we want to have lots of communications going on during the whole process. Our business partners, so your subcontractors, people who you work with that may even be able to help you, we want to be communicating with them. And your internal, again, this kind of goes back to your strong day-to-day. If we're having any kind of communication breakdowns that cause problems in our optimal outcomes in serving our customers internally in the regular day-to-day, we definitely want to address that because it is integral during CAT volume. So I again gave the example of the schedule. So if I'm in charge of deploying the teams, I need to be communicating on an ongoing basis more than ever my timeout, where I'm at. If I'm the person who's frontline and going out in the scene, I need to be communicating what's going on out there back. And there has to be this constant tweaking and strong communication so that we can get the information. Everybody knows who's on first. And this is an example that with press releases and kind of getting information out there, that we got a lot of press, a lot of information went out there. And these CAT moments aren't just about how do we get as much work as we can. It's truly, and we want to look at that. And when we talk about engaging our team, this is our time to shine. This is when it becomes serving our purpose more than ever. Right? So resource management. Now we're going to get into we're going to kind of end in some of the nuts and bolts here. So when I talk about resources, I mean, we're talking supplies, our equipment, manpower, specialty, financial resources. So for our supply inventory, we want pre-made lists, strong inventory management. You notice, and again, these are all going to go into the playbook. So if I'm dealing with a high wind playbook, that list for high wind may have tarps on it. And on equipment, I'm going to be looking at my chainsaws versus for water losses. So we want that stuff set up. We want to have good systems at regular levels. Acquisitions. We want those to be efficient. The worst thing is that there's the one person who knows where we get the bougie whopper, and he got sent out on a loss in an area with no reception. So we want this stuff global. For those of you, and if you don't have the new update, we have a document library in iRestore. So I encourage you to put all your documents, any lists like this, in your document library so everybody has access to them. But we don't, we want everything accessible and in order. And again, I already mentioned diversifying, because at any given point, whether it's a supplier, whether it's infrastructure or a shortage, we want to diversify suppliers and products so that we have more resources available to us on our supplies. Our equipment inventory should be field ready at all times, functionable and clean. There's nothing worse, and we may have all gone through this. I remember day happened to me many, many years ago, but never again, is, cat volume happens and there's 20 DHs sitting there tagged for repair because nobody facilitated the repair. We don't want to do that. We want strong inventory systems. We want the maintenance, tracking, cleaning, restocking on point, because we have to be able to pivot. We want to have access and suppliers for equipment. And I know somebody asked about power. So if you need backup power generators, again, this is where we want suppliers, subcontractors available. We want that list ready on who can help us get the equipment, even possibly set it up, because that's not uncommon, and those services are available out there. This is just a little sample, like a little tip if you do rent equipment. If you're using any kind of barcode system, what you can do is you can preload some barcodes, and this is the iris screenshot. And actually, I encourage you to use a color, because that way your team knows which is your rental equipment, and you can preload a bunch of DHUs, air movers, anything else, so that you're ready. That if you bring in rental equipment at any point, you can barcode it and use your existing operating systems to track it. One of the things that I do emphasize, and again, this was a thing I learned from a mistake from our first rental ever, is that you want to be strategic. In fact, in all your scheduling and things, you want to be strategic. But if you do rent equipment, you want to make sure your team kind of stops, which jobs it's going to, and you kind of want to use a first in, first out, first in scenario. So typically you may have to rent it for a week. So you don't want them mixing your equipment the day you get that rental. You want to get all rental equipment out. You want to get it out for your 3 days or whatever, and you want to be able to rotate it on another batch of jobs before your teams pull in your equipment, because you want to be able to maximize it. And keep in mind, when you're dealing with cat volume, you could be going into weeks of this. So by the time you get your rental equipment, you have a natural flow of turning over and collecting that rental equipment back. Our manpower, so we diversified, cross-training as much as we can is key. Trained, we talked about scheduling and strategically deployed. It's all kind of, and being engaged. But when I talk about strategically deployed and scheduling, we want whoever's doing the dispatching and laying this out and getting people out to be utilizing our resources to the max capacity. So it goes in with scheduling, but if I have a monitoring team, for example, I don't want necessarily to send 2 technicians who can run a loss to do that monitoring. I'm going to split them up and give them a helper to help pull that equipment, not using 2 of my skilled people at that point. So we want to be able to be nimble and think that way. And I do want to point out in here this leadership bubble, because one of the biggest opportunities and things we can be doing on an ongoing basis to get ready is to be developing our soft skills and our leadership skills in our team soon as for every technician, soon as they enter, and make that a point that that's something we value. And we oftentimes get caught up in our technical training. But when we think about, especially during cat volume, if I have 2 really strong technicians, but they can't run a crew, okay, then that's great. I have 2 strong technicians who can go do a water loss. But if I have 2 strong technicians who develop the confidence, soft skills, leadership abilities to be able to give them people who have less technical skills and get the job done, they just increase their value, and they're that can be very strategic during cat volume. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to go a little fast here because I'm running out of time. So, manpower, subcontractors, but we'll stay on however long for questions. Subcontractors, all trades, emergency staffing, reassign trades that are scheduled in house. Those of us who are doing construction, we want to take a look at the schedule. Can we free people up by something we were planning to do in house, get a trade? Employment agencies, again, when we have strong leadership in the field, you can dilute your team with hands that can follow instruction. Other contractors and restoration friends. So I do encourage people to make restoration friends adjacent. And when I say other contractors, so in addition to our subs, when we're hiring a sub, one of the standard questions that I like to see is, are you available for after hours? Um, this is what we do. So it's almost an interview when you're bringing a sub on board. They understand your company, what you do. We're asking some questions. And are they willing to help out in these situations? And then we want to know what the rate is. So, excuse me, if we're doing that as we're onboarding new subcontractors and keeping track of it appropriately, we just added immensely to our resources. Where I said other contractors, that could be, I use landscapers as an example because they may not be set up necessarily in your sub list, but landscapers are often free in the winter. And they're skilled, hardworking people who can follow instructions from one of your great technicians. And we can develop relationships with companies and people like that who can help us when we're busy, like in the winter during the next polar vortex. And you'll see here, this is a sample of the Irish Store Company list, which many of you may be using this for marketing activities, but I encourage you to also, and whatever you're using, we want to have access to all of our subcontractors, our vendors, our suppliers to the team. You can use the same system and get them all loaded in there so it's accessible. But you can also use this tagging feature. So you'll notice if I'm looking for a roofer, this one says roof because we just had high winds and trees falling on roofs. I can pull up all the roofing resources I have in a minute. If I'm looking for which of our subcontractors can help out after hours, I can type it in, do a search, and pull all of our subcontractors pretty easily who can help out. Specialty services. So regional, if you're in a historic area, you have specific customers that may have special needs. You want to make sure you have these contractors and business partners set up, whether it's artwork. You want to make sure you have backups for your dumpsters and your landfills and dropping and any other things based on your region or your existing customer base. Financial, again, very important to have good day-to-day job and cash flow management systems in place going into a CAT. Money oftentimes goes out faster than it comes in, and that's one of the biggest. So we want to make sure the team is ready to jump in on strong collection activity immediately, based on the timing of your execution, immediately when it's appropriate to start collecting that money. And again, we want to account for any financial implications based on that CAT scenario. So self-pays, or if we're dealing with a lot of large commercials that may have high deductibles, we want to account for that. And it's really good to have strong banking relationships and credit, because at any given point, you could be dealing with CAT volume and the juggle of the cash flow, and you can mix in a couple large commercial jobs that can quickly deplete your funds, and you don't want to not be able to do them. And so that's where having those good relationships and being able to pick up the phone can really help. And so always be prepared for CAT loss volumes is really the moral of the story. But one of my biggest tips is always post CAT huddle with the entire team. And the reason I say this, I think most of the great things I've learned about CAT volume deploying came from post CAT huddles, and that's the technicians to the leadership, everybody together, because that's where you'll get all the information on those playbooks. So I touched base on the floods that happened, where they were ongoing floods, but separate events in different areas. And during the post CAT huddle, one person said, we should have one time, based on the geography and the nature of that, we used an assembly line to deploy. So we had a team out doing the assessment, mapping it. We had another team extracting, another demo team, and another team doing equipment. And that worked really well in that scenario because of the nature of that particular event. And in reflection of the 2018 series of events, because they were in very concentrated geographies, we would have he proposed that we use the wrong playbook. Basically, we should have pulled the assembly line playbook for the water loss on that one. And I went, he was probably right. So, but again, that is great input and something to think about for the next one. So I've been talking about the playbook and getting ready, and I'm going to kind of go to questions because I went a little bit over. So I am going to unmute everybody at this time and take any questions. And I had a question, did we get, yes, you may have a copy of the presentation. That's not a problem at all.
Yeah, Jim, Lindsay will follow up with the PowerPoint PDF version of it, and she will email everyone that registered the presentation.
Is there any questions about this, about responding to cat volume or iRestore that we can answer at this time?
Is there any plans with iRestore to be used on other devices other than iPhones and iPads?
Yes, we do have plans on that. We are working on them on a daily basis, and we hope to make an announcement on that by the end of the quarter.
Okay, cool.
Other questions? Ryan, did you have any closing remarks for the group?
The only closing remark for those that do have iRestore already is really leverage the focus board during a CAT event. That is a really good tool to help you progress jobs through the various statuses and make sure that you're progressing them from new to estimating or to no jobs if you're not going to do them. We've had one customer that, during that polar vortex that Lisa mentioned earlier, one of my customers said that if it hadn't been for the focus board on iRestore, he would have never been able to get through that event in such an organized fashion. So I would encourage
those calls.
Focus board every day, get to know that and start leveraging it to manage the workflow, especially when you get a large volume of jobs like a CAT event.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'd love to hear back on topics, time of the day, any other feedback that we can make our presentations better and help you out. So we'll be following up. And if you have any follow-up questions that you'd like to ask privately, feel free to reach out. Ryan and my email's right up there on the screen. And have a great, wonderful rest of the day.